Okay, and I'm going to move my stuff around here. I've already, in the document itself, started a search for 5.20.00, and the first entry that it finds is the one about lost patron card tracking. This one, everything that I'll be showing you through these release notes are basically fixes to things that have been there before, so we won't spend an awful lot of time on each of these. But if there's something that you'd like to see additional information about or see what it looks like online, I can certainly do that for you. This one had been working for a while, then wasn't working, and now it is working again. If you have a patron who habitually loses their patron card, you can now keep track of all of the patron card numbers that have been assigned to the patron. You can see that described in the user manual, and I'm not sure. Okay, and this is where it is at 5.14, the lost card tracking. If you have someone who has lost their borrower's card multiple times, you'll see all of the various iterations of the card number appearing in the patron display when you look at the patron record. It's important to note that you can restore a card, so be sure if this situation occurs in your library that you make sure that the person in front of you with the card is really the person the card belongs to before you either restore it or assign a new card number. There are a couple of options that you need to know about as well. You can search for either the current card or a lost card number. And if it's an old number, you'll get a screen warning so that you'll know that it is something that has been replaced by a newer number. Okay, I think that will be very useful for a lot of you. Let me go ahead and make it to the next one. The next one is offline circulation, and I'm not exactly 100% sure what the change has been on this, but last time we met I demonstrated the offline circ again, and things seem to be working pretty good. Remember that the first time that you use, before the first time you use the offline circ, be sure to download the extension for Firefox so that that is available and ready to use. And if you lose connection to the server, the way that you initiate going into the offline circ mode is by clicking on this V that's going to show up in your top bar here. Okay. That is fully documented as well, so I think that the last time we looked at this, it might not have been documented. So that's just an update on the offline circ. Okay, the next one, this one is one that is nice to know about as well. We can now create individual default settings for creating item records. Let me go into my sandbox. I decided to use this particular record to demonstrate this. What I have done is I've set up earlier today some default values for creating item records. So if I click on Add Item again, it will default to all of the fields that I had set up as default values. So it's got everything in here, including part of a barcode. And the way that I assign my barcodes is instead of using a barcode, I just use today's date. And since I've already done one before this, I'm putting an A after it, so I have unique. But I had filled out all of these fields, and under options, my active default is kitty knits. In other words, when I save these defaults, I called it kitty knits, so I can tell. I can also, when I pull up my default at this point, I can clear the values, I can remove it from the default. So if you forget that you have an active default values that are set, you'll be able to clear out the form very quickly. One important thing to know about this is that you can create multiple different sets of item templates, basically, that you're going to put in here. In the documentation, it does show that there are templates for like a reference book, so that you would have the item type filled in already, and you would have some of your location fields, your collection codes, all of those already filled out to indicate that the item goes into the reference collection. I only have one default value here. Let me pull up another record and I'll show you how I created this. Okay. Okay, I'm going to add a new item to this record. And you'll notice that I don't go into my add screen immediately. I have another click here that I need to go into. When I go into my add item, I will get the edit new item form displaying, and as you can see, it has all of the values that I have for kitty knits. Okay, my options is that I don't want to apply these defaults, so I don't want to choose from under my options, but I do want to come over here and clear the default values, because the default values from the previous item that I added don't apply to this particular record. When I cleared the default values, you see that the locations and everything that show up equal what is in the item that's already attached to this particular record. And I'm going to go ahead and add a barcode. Actually, I'm just going to leave it like this. And in this case, what I want to do is to save the default values, but this one I will just call this one new main stacks. And I can then save this one for the future. And it will immediately default to that particular value. As I go on with other material, if I pull up a book that I want to have, or an item, a title that I want to have in my reference collection, I can create another new template simply by changing my shelving location. And instead of calling it the main book, so just call it reference. So I now have multiple different options that I can use in, I'm sorry, what I did is for this particular one, I just overwrote it and called it new reference. So this is something that can happen. If I go to a different item now, I'll be able to choose from either either the kitty knits save values or the new reference one. So this is something that will be useful if you're adding the same collection or adding material to the same collection. You can have a template set up and use it. These templates can be used by anyone who is in your same branch. So once these templates are set up, or once these default values are set up, you'll be able to just use it. Anyone who can add item records who has that privilege will be able to use these defaults. Okay, again, that is documented already in the manual. It's section 9.5.4, so you can find some additional information about how that is used in the documentation. Any questions on this before I go down to the next? Okay. If there are no physical copies attached to a title, the results list was saying 0 of 0 copies available. And if you have either electronic links to some of your records, or if you're using Overdrive or some other service such as that, if there isn't a physical copy attached to the bibliographic record now, the line 0 of 0 copies available is suppressed, so you won't have to try and figure out how to suppress it in your discovery layer. So that's something that's already done. The search to hold feature wasn't returning to the patron record. This was a code fusion problem that was discovered by South Central that has been fixed. So now once you use the search to hold feature, you'll get returned back to the patron record. Okay, and from now to the end of the document, the rest of these are all bug fixes that have been completed. There's one that was from a ticket that was sent in by a Waldo library, so we'll get down to that one. But in this one, these are basically code fusion options, and several of them are about holds. There was one problem with fines that I wanted to make sure that you knew about. If you had done any testing in your sandbox, you may have found this one, but in the way that the fines were working, I could never waive or forgive charges. I could only pay them. And I reported that. That has been fixed, so I would suggest testing that particular feature to make sure that it is doing what you want it to. Let's see, the other ones here, there was a proxy problem. For a large site, I'm not exactly sure what that means, but I would say that probably the University of Hartford and St. John's University would be considered large sites for us. I suspect that the library that reported this was South Central, and they do have a lot of branches, so that definitely is an issue. In most of the Waldo libraries, we don't have a lot of different branches for an institution. They did have a lot of different branches in some of the public library systems, so that was a problem that was discovered in the discovery layer. If you do have branches and want to have a little bit better definition, you'll be able to do that now because of this next fix for creating a search filter. The library that reported the problem with Internet Explorer, that's been fixed, so you can ask the person who has that particular terminal to try searching again. Hopefully it will be now working correctly. And let's see, the digital object thumbnail is one that probably none of the libraries are using yet, so that one I'll just sort of skip. And there's another discovery layer problem that's listed here. So primarily the things that are in the release notes are items that were reported as bugs for the code fusion. In the agenda that I emailed out to the Waldo support mailing list, I did attach a file, and I'll show you now. I did a screenshot of all of the open tickets in the support center account for Code Fusion and attached it. So if there's anything in this list that you're interested in seeing more details about, just let me know the support ID number and I'll copy that and send it out on the Waldo support list. You'll notice that quite a few of what's in here are discovery layer problems or issues. Most of them are bugs. I sorted it by the status of the tickets, so you can see that there are quite a few bugs that are there. There are a few enhancements that are identified. That is not all of the enhancements that are being requested by South Central in particular, but it's the ones that are documented in here. And there are a few that haven't been addressed yet. They're still identified as open. But you will notice that a lot of the open bugs have something to do either with the discovery layer or with holds. And some of them are still there, like the forgive or write-off options and the fines, because I haven't told them that they can close it yet. So if there's anything in here that you'd like to have a little bit more information about, just let me know which ticket number it is, and I will do a screen print of the ticket information and send it out. Most of these have a statement in the ticket itself saying that it's on the list to be fixed, but it's down the list, or it's down the list for quite a ways. My understanding of where they are now is that they have, that LibLime has, the programmers have finished the primary purposes or the primary features of Code Fusion, that those have all been addressed in some way or another. And what they're now focusing their work on is getting the bugs fixed. I don't have a list of the priorities of which bugs are at the top of the list or not. I can ask for that if that's something you'd be interested in. And there are currently, LibLime has no outstanding orders for new features, but they do have an indication from South Central that they will be requesting some new features. I think there's about a dozen of them, and those will be added to their priority list, their agenda, so that they can start working on those as well. So the primary focus of the developers is still going to be bug fixes. They hope to have as many of them fixed as possible by the end of this month. And we would then want to start looking at figuring out when we might want to start encouraging migration to the new version of the software. I should also mention that the numbering of the software has been upgraded to 5.20. As you've known from past sessions, that it has been set at 5.19 to indicate that it's on the server, or that it's on the sandbox side of things. But because it's now labeled as 5.20, that means that at this point that they are fairly confident that this is stable enough to go into production. The most recent fixes and the brief view of the list of open issues for the software are primarily what has been covered so far in the most recent fixes. There was one feature that last week or 2 weeks ago that I talked about as well, and that is the enhancement to the mark import process for delete options, and that again is for files that are sent to you by vendors for electronic books. That one I've tried deleting records in the Waldo sandbox, but I don't have the same records that you would have in your databases, so I either need to get more files that I can test and just try and randomly hit some records. I have seen that the records that did match did in fact get deleted. So if any of you have any files or any records that you know need to be deleted and you want to have some help in testing those in your sandbox, please let me know and I will work with you to come up with a time where we can get that done. Okay, and the last thing in the 5.20 update is that if you are ready to upgrade from 5.18 to 5.20, you can request an upgrade in the support center. As usual, when you enter a request for an upgrade, be sure to mention a date that you would like to target for your upgrade. Also keep in mind that LibLime does not do upgrades on Fridays or on weekends. So basically you'd be looking at a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and that the work is scheduled so that it is during your off time, so, or during your overnight on your schedule. And if you are open 24 hours, it would help to know what time you would suggest for the upgrade. So low use period would be what would be targeted. Okay, any questions about 5.20? Presently, I do not have any information about any enhancement requests from any other groups. There are still the enhancement requests that remain from what was from the 2017 list. These 4 items are on a tracker that we go over with on our calls with Patrick on a weekly basis. Again, the additional information from LibLime is basically an estimate of the number of hours that it would take. And as I mentioned a while back, that the authority record enhancements that are here are only part of what the authority work would be that LibLime would be interested in addressing. The South Central Library System also has some authority work that they would like to have done, so I think that we would try to work together with them in order to come up with a solution that would work for everyone. Okay, the recordings again are being placed on YouTube. I think I'm behind one. After the meetings are done, the GoToMeeting software itself has a conversion program that I have to run against the file to get it into a format that can be used in YouTube easily. So it takes a few minutes for that to happen, and sometimes I get distracted and don't get it moved into YouTube. It's a real simple process for me to do, so it's just a matter of me getting it done and then updating the page that has the links. Okay, is there anything else that anybody wants to bring up and discuss or ask a question about? Oh, I'm sorry, I've not kept up with the chat here. Um, let's see, Ben, the defaults are for staff members with accounts that have privileges to add records, to add item records, and you can share them across staff accounts. That's what I read in the documentation. So be cautious with those. If there are things that some staff want to set up that you don't want others to use, be sure to name them so that people are kept away from them. Okay. Okay, so I think that's all that I missed. Any other questions or comments? Okay, our next meeting is scheduled for October 25th. That's in 2 weeks. Same time, and if there's anything that you'd like me to cover at that point in time, I'd certainly be willing to add something to the agenda. One thing that we haven't actually gone over a lot are the changes to the discovery layer, and that might be something that we might want to, at least take a look at what the new things are. So if you haven't started looking at version 5.20 in your sandbox, that you'd at least be aware of some of the options now available in the discovery layer. So that might be one thing that I add for next week or for next time's agenda. Okay, that's all I've got today. Thank you so much, and we'll meet again on October 25th.